The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he had sat down, his disciples came to him. He began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven." The Gospel of the Lord. How many of you want to be saints? Some do, some not. Some are not so sure. We're all called to be saints. All of you, all of us are called to be saints. And Jesus gives us the formula. God, in a way, is counting on us. In the world, we see there's so much evil, right? There's so much sin. And so God wants to build goodness. He wants to build his kingdom through people like you and me. So it's not really a choice. It's obligatory, right? That's our calling. That's our vocation. Anything short of becoming a saint would be a tragedy. And I think Leon Bloy said that too. The only tragedy in life is not to become a saint. The only tragedy in life is not to become a saint. And then Jesus shows us the formula in the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes, we hear them, we know them, we like them, but we don't really understand them necessarily, and we don't really put them into practice. But they are the recipe, they are the formula to sanctity. And they really describe Jesus, first of all, because he is holy. So they paint a portrait of Jesus himself. All these qualities that Jesus speaks about those who are blessed, they actually identify him. They're all about him. And the word blessed is, you can interpret that as happy or fortunate or favored by God. But these are very contrary to what the world understands as happiness, as being favored, right? So they're very countercultural. And indeed, Jesus is countercultural. Christianity is countercultural. Sanctity is countercultural. So Jesus asks us to be different, to be countercultural, to be saints in a difficult, challenging, evil world. He's counting on us to be that light, to be that leaven, to be that salt that makes a difference. And so let's go through the Beatitudes so we can understand it more deeply and then try to practice them so that we will become saints. So what is the first Beatitude? The poor in spirit. What does it mean to be poor in spirit? It means to know that we have nothing, that we're empty, that we're impoverished. We have nothing to call our own. We have nothing to brag about. Every good that we can do, every good that we are, comes from God as gift. So we don't take credit for anything. Saint Therese of Lisieux said this: "After this life, when I go before the Lord, I will go to him with empty hands. I will go to him with empty hands. When he asks, 'What have I done?' I will show him my empty hands. I've done nothing. Any good that I've done came from you, God." Right? So that's being poor in spirit. That's being humble. That's being truthful. Is that counter to our world? Yes, it is. People take credit for everything. They are very prideful. We see a lot of that in our world. But Jesus says, "Learn from me, take after me, for I am meek and humble of heart." So we too, if we want to be holy, we need to be humble. We need to realize our weaknesses, our limitations, our complete dependence on God for everything. All the good that we have, all the good that we can do comes from Him as gift. We take credit for nothing. We know we have nothing to call our own. Everything we have comes from God as gift. That's what it means to be poor in spirit. That's what it takes to be a saint. And the second beatitude is what? Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who mourn. The world doesn't understand that, right? Why would they be blessed if they're mourning? Well, because God is with them. Jesus, in a way, is saying, those who are suffering, I am with you, and I'm all you need. Everything will pass. You grow from your suffering, and you will be rewarded in the next life. So I am with you. Those who are oppressed, those who suffer, right? I am with you. And then also, there's a deeper spiritual meaning here too. These are people who mourn for their sins. It's called contrition. It's called compunction. And all of these complement each other. It goes with humility. Those who are humble knows that they are weak, that they are sinful, and that they offend God, and they are sorry for that. There's this constant contrition in their heart. They know they offend God every day by their thoughts, their words, their actions, and they are so sorry to offend God, who is all good and deserving of all my love. And not only their own sin, but they are mournful, they are sad, they are sorry for all the sins in the world. They look around, they turn on the TV, they see so much evil, so much sin against a God who is perfectly good and loving. And so that's why they mourn. That's why they grieve. That's why they are sorry. And the saints know this. They are sorry for their own sins, and they are sorry for all the sins and the evil in the world. It's like that's what we give to God, who is so good to us. And so there's always that sorrow, that compunction, that contrition. And then the third one is what? Blessed are the meek. Again, the world sees that word as being weak, but it's not easy being meek. Meek takes patience, it takes strength, it takes gentleness, it takes self-restraint to be meek. And Jesus says too, learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart. So meekness is not weakness, but it's strength. It takes strength to bite your tongue, to not lash back, to not react to hostility or when you're provoked. It's easy to be aggressive, to react, to retaliate. Oh, anybody can do that. It's easy to be angry, to be aggressive, and we see so much of that in our world. But it takes patience, it takes discipline, it takes self-restraint to be gentle, to be kind, to be considerate. And so the saints are meek. They have self-control. They have self-will. They don't have to react when they're provoked. And we see this with Jesus. You know, when he was brought before the priest, one of the servants struck him in the face. And how did he react? If I said something wrong, tell me what I said. But if I said nothing wrong, then why did you strike me? Right? That's meekness, that's gentleness, that's being direct without losing your temper, losing control. And that's what we so desperately need in today's world, more patience, self-control, and gentleness. And what is the fourth beatitude? Those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, hunger and thirst for goodness. Because there's so much evil, so much sin, the saints they hunger and they thirst for righteousness in the world. And where does righteousness come from? But God alone. So they hunger and thirst that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. They seek to live out, to bring about God's will in our world. And that's what Jesus did too. I came to do the will of the Father. And he taught us in the Our Father to pray that thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And the saints live they seek to live out God's will in their daily lives, and they pray that God's will be accomplished in everything. Not their own will, right? That's the world. The world, everyone is looking to accomplish their own will, never thinking about God's will. And so that's what it means to hunger and thirst for righteousness. And that comes from the entire being, right? That's pretty intense. When you're hungry and you're thirsty, right? You're craving, you're desiring. You need that righteousness, that God's will be accomplished. And then what is the next beatitude? Blessed are the merciful, compassion. That's what we're really lacking in our world. So much hostility, anger, blame. We need to be merciful. And what does it mean to be merciful? To be merciful is first to empathize, to identify with the other person who is suffering. Even though we're not suffering, we can identify and relate to the other person who is. And then the second part is to be generous, to do something kind, to make up for that, to help relieve their pain and their suffering. Yesterday, I was going to get something to eat, and I walked by a homeless lady sitting there. She did not look good. And I asked her, "How are you doing?" And she said, "I've had better days." And I looked at my wallet, and the smallest bill I had was a 20, so I gave it to her. And she just lit up, right? She said, "Thank you," right? And then I said, "Pray for me." And she said, "I will." So now I got her praying for me, and she's happy, right? And so that was a little act of mercy on my part. I could identify, I empathize with her suffering, and I did something to ease that suffering. So those are the things that the saints do, right? It's not about them. They see others who are suffering. They can identify with that, and they do what they can to alleviate that suffering. And then what is the next one? The clean of heart. Blessed are the clean of heart. So Jesus tells us to love God with all our heart, all our mind, all our soul, all our being. The clean of heart, or sometimes called the pure of heart, is that what are our intentions? Why do we do what we do? Who do we love? What do we love? We're supposed to love God with all our heart. We're supposed to give Him all our heart. Everything we do must be for His glory and out of love for Him. But oftentimes it's not like that. Oftentimes our heart is impure. So oftentimes we have ulterior motives, selfish motives. We do things for our own benefit. The saints don't do that. The saints do it out of love for God, for His glory. They live for that. And so we need to examine our heart. Is it pure? Is it clean? Or are there mixed motives there? Selfish motives, or sin, or worldly attachments? So the saints are no longer attached to the world. They're no longer attached to sin. They're no longer attached to themselves. Their heart is entirely for God. It's entirely pure and beautiful and clean. And so we too need to examine our heart. What do we love? Who do we love? And does that direct all our actions and choices? And then what is the next one? Blessed are the peacemakers. The peacemakers, right? Jesus came to reconcile us to the Father and to one another. He came to bring peace on earth. And so those who are peacemakers, they do the same thing. They take on that same mindset. They want to reconcile themselves with the Father always. They go to confession when they sin. They ask forgiveness when they sin. They never want to be separated from God. They never want to offend Him. Not only that, they want other people to be reconciled with the Father. When they see people who are far from God, that makes them sad. So they try to bring them back. They pray for them, that this whole world would be reconciled to the Father, because we are all children of God. And Jesus came to reconcile all of us to the Father. But in our world today, there's so many people who don't know God, who don't believe in God, who don't love God, who are not reconciled with God. And so the saints pray for their conversion. that they too may be reconciled to God. And then they also work towards reconciliation among themselves, among each other. When there's a conflict with somebody, they try to resolve that conflict as soon as possible. They forgive, they let go, they move on, so as not to create divisions and conflict. They are about peacemaking, reconciliation, harmony, unity. That's what God is about. The devil, on the other hand, is about dissension, conflict, disunity. The devil loves that. When we argue, when we fight, when we hate each other, when there's division, the devil wins. But God is the opposite. That saddens him to see his children fighting, hating each other, calling each other names, not talking to each other, holding grudges. So that's why the saints try to resolve those conflicts and bring people together. And what is the next one, and the last one? Blessed those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. Was Jesus persecuted for the sake of righteousness? Yes, he was. He stood up to the Pharisees, the scribes, the elders, the priests, and all the hypocrites and everything else. He spoke the truth, and he was crucified because of that. So the saints are the same way. They're not afraid to speak the truth. They're not afraid to be loyal to Jesus. They're not afraid to go against the world, all the trends and the movements and the fads. They're not afraid to speak up. They're not afraid to be different. They're not afraid to be persecuted, to be looked down upon, to be hated. They are courageous. They are faithful. They are bold. They are one with Jesus. So what about us? Are we truly faithful to Jesus? Do we accept all the teachings of the church? Are we ashamed of being Catholics? Are we ashamed of expressing our views on hot topics because it might be controversial, because it might not be popular, because we may be called names? A lot of times, right? So we just have to choose. Do we just blend in with the world and be comfortable, or are we faithful to Jesus and risk being persecuted, looked down upon, and be called all kinds of evil? Right? And Jesus said that specifically too. He said, when people insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil falsely against you because of me, rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. So he made it personal. Now it's your turn. If people persecute you, revile you, call you all kinds of names, because of me, rejoice and be glad, because your reward will be great in heaven. So the saints are those who are faithful to Jesus. They don't take the easy way out, the path of least resistance. They are faithful to him until death. And so we should be too. That's what he's counting on us. He wants more saints, more people who are not afraid to stand up for him. So we give thanks to Jesus for teaching us the Beatitudes. They sound difficult, but the more we practice them, the more they become second nature. And that's how the saints do it, right? They practice them, they implement them, they meditate on them until they become second nature. And God gives us the grace. We just have to do our part. He doesn't call us to anything that's impossible. Whatever he calls us to do, he gives us the ability. So we just need to do our part. He's counting on us. He's counting on you and me to be saints.